Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's America Saves Summer Education Series. I'm Amy Miller, Director of America Saves, and so glad you're joining us. Today, we're focusing on a new savings account option that many families are hearing about in the news 530A accounts, also referred to as Trump accounts. Our goal today is simple to help savers understand what these accounts are, how they work, and how they may fit into a broader financial plan. Here at America Saves, we believe that savings is more than a financial transaction. It's more than sticking up money in an account. It's a habit that can help people achieve their goals and build greater financial security over time. When a new savings opportunity becomes available, it's natural to have questions. You may be wondering how this works, whether it's right for your family, or how it compares to other savings options that you may already know about. So today's webinar is designed to provide clear, unbiased information so that you can better understand this account and decide whether it may have a place in your savings journey. Okay, so what we're going to cover today. Today's session is going to walk you through the basics in plain language. We'll cover what these accounts are, who's eligible, how contributions work, how an account can potentially grow over time, and some important considerations before opening one. Our goal is for you to leave with a better understanding of this new savings option and the confidence to determine whether it aligns with your family's goals. So to help us navigate this topic, I am very excited to introduce our guest expert, Jamie Bosse. Jamie is a certified financial planner with CGN Advisors, where she works helping individuals and families organize their financial lives, make the most of their opportunities, and move closer to achieving their financial goals. She's a very passionate advocate for financial literacy. She's an accomplished author and a mom of four. She's written several books focused on helping families build financial confidence, including Money Boss Mom and Investing for Tweens, and the Milton, the Money Savvy Pup children's book series. Jamie, we're so excited to have you. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you for being here. We are so happy to have you here to explain, what these accounts are and how they work and, what our savers should know before deciding whether this is an option that's right for them. So again, thank you and welcome.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. I'm pleased to be here. So I'd like to start by asking everyone to just think about something for a moment. So imagine your child could receive $1,000 as a newborn or receive that same $1,000 on their 18th birthday. It's the exact same amount of money, but it's not the same opportunity. So the newborn's $1,000 has 18 more years to grow through the power of compounding, and the 18-year-old's doesn't. So at its core, today's presentation is about one simple idea. The earlier we start investing, the more opportunities we can create for our kids. So we'll explore how these new accounts work, and more importantly, how it might fit into your family's overall financial plan. So to start, let's start with the basics. What exactly is this 530A account? So it's a brand new investment account just created as a part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And the official name is 530A, but you'll often hear them referred to as Trump accounts. And the real goal here is to help children begin investing early in life. So for children who qualify, the federal government has committed to contributing a one-time $1,000 seed investment to get the account started. The money is then invested in a U.S. stock index fund, giving it the opportunity to grow over many years. So I would think of it less as a savings account and more of a long-term investment account, because it's really designed to harness the power of compound growth over time. So why were these created? One of the biggest advantages any investor has isn't picking the perfect stock. It's the time that they're invested in the market. So the younger someone starts investing, the longer their money has to grow. And that's really the idea behind these accounts. Instead of waiting until adulthood to begin investing, Congress wants to encourage families to start building wealth from birth, because starting early matters. I think we need to go to the next slide. There we go. Yep. And so, because that's the big thing, is that time in the market is what really matters for the long term for investors. And as a financial planner, I've been doing this for a little over 20 years. And everybody I've met with pretty much says, I wish I would have started investing earlier. So now here's an opportunity to start investing way earlier for our children and to give them a head start and a leg up when it comes to having flexibility in the future. So why consider opening one? If your child qualifies, there are several reasons why a family might want to consider opening one. First, there's the obvious benefit of the government's $1,000 contribution. This only applies to children born between 2025 and 2028, but that's free money if you're eligible. Secondly, the account is invested for long-term growth rather than sitting in cash. So if you have, a bank account for your child versus investing it in a 530A, you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck out of the invested money than money that's sitting in a savings account. And third, there's an opportunity for other people to contribute. So, family members can add money to this. Employers, if they're willing to participate, can contribute additional money over time. And there's a lot of foundations like the Dell Family Foundation who have committed to making additional contributions to these accounts as well. So you can't get those additional funding sources if you don't have the account open to begin with. And finally, the biggest benefit is the earlier you start investing, the more opportunity there is for compound interest to work. So when we think about investment over the long term, over like a 10-year time period, for example, 7 or 8 of those years are really awesome in the market. 2 or 3 of them are not as fun. But over that 10-year time span, you've almost always more than doubled the money that you've contributed if you stayed invested the whole time. So there's a lot of power there. And the younger you start, the more powerful it can be. So this doesn't mean that this account's right for everyone, but it's certainly worth taking a look at. So on the next slide, we'll talk about, is it right for your family? And this is where financial planning and looking at the big picture comes into play. When there's a new account that comes out or a new investment, people naturally ask, should I do this? And the answer is, it depends, right? Before investing for your child, I'd encourage families to think about your overall financial picture, right? Do you have an emergency fund? Are you carrying high interest debt? Are you saving enough for your own retirement? Are you already using a 529 plan or other, child-related investment accounts? Because this account isn't about replacing everything else that you're doing. It's about deciding where this account fits amongst your family's priorities. And it's important to know what you're saving for, right? So any money you put into this account is long-term money, right? Like that's locked up until the child is 18. So if you are trying to save money to buy your kid a car at 16, this isn't the right account to do that in. This is more of a long-term investment account. So those are some things to think about before considering opening one. But you also, you want to understand the rules of these accounts, right? Because as I mentioned, these funds can't be accessed till the child is 18. And so that puts some limitations on what you can use it for. And the money is pre-tax, meaning that you put money in there or the government puts money in there and it's taxed when you take it out in the future. So there is some tax planning that will have to happen on the other end when money comes out. And at age 18, this money can come out for education, buying a home, or medical expenses, but it's still subject to tax, but not subject to the 10% penalty. So there's just a lot of pieces to factor in, and knowing what you're saving for and what's the right vehicle to do that in. So on the next slide, we're talking about how to open one. So Amy and I actually just opened them a couple weeks ago. So we actually went through the process ourselves. But when you open one, it's pretty straightforward, but there are a couple of pieces at play here. So you can open the accounts at trumpaccounts.gov or the Trump Account app. And you'll also need to have the IRS Form 4547 completed to get this account fully opened. Now, some of you may have already filed the Form 4547 with your 2025 tax return if you already knew you wanted to open one of these accounts. But if you haven't, you can fill that out when you're opening the account and you can do it online or you can mail it in. But if you mail it in, that adds some extra processing time before the account would be open. And you do have to go through the ID Me process while setting it up. So this is the IRS kind of process for making sure it's actually you who is opening the account. So you will have to upload a copy of your driver's license or passport or other government issued ID to prove who you are. And you also need to have your child's Social Security number and birth date handy to fill all that stuff out once you're in there. And then once it's opened, you can link a payment method and then start to add contributions. So it's a pretty straightforward process. But in terms of contributions, so after the account's opened, additional contributions can be made each year, and there'll be annual contribution limits. Right now, that limit is $5,000. And, parents, grandparents, relatives, employers, are all able to contribute. So this is fairly unique that if, you might want to check with your employer to see if they're adopting this and matching contributions. With that, the annual limit's $5,000. So if your employer puts in $2,500, then you can only put in $2,500 to add up to that full $5,000 for the year. And the $1,000 government seed money is not counted in that $5,000 limit. So that's an extra piece on top of that. But one important distinction is that the money you put in as a parent goes in after tax, and any money that your employer, government, or other foundations or agencies put in is pre-tax. So you'll actually want to track how much you contribute personally or how much comes from grandparents or other individuals, so that when it's taken out in the future, those dollars aren't taxed twice. Because if you think about it, you pay tax on the money and put it in, and then it grows, and then you pay tax when it comes out. But you need to track that. It's called your tax basis. So whatever you've put in, you want to track that so that those dollars aren't taxed again when you take money out in the future. So that adds an extra layer of complexity, but important to note. So let's look at some examples of how these accounts might grow over time, right? So in this example, the child receives the $1,000 government seed contribution, and then nothing else is ever added. So even without additional contributions, that money has nearly 2 decades to grow through investing. And as you can see in this chart, it's grown to about $5,000 by age 18. So you put in $1,000, it's worth about $5,000 by the time it has some time to grow. So this example, it's not meant to predict future returns. We can't say what that is for sure. And the market will go up and down. But this simply illustrates how giving investments time can make a meaningful difference in the long run. So let's look at another example. So in this one, the family gets the $1,000 seed money and is contributing $50 per month. So the family has put in about $10,800 over those 18 years, and the account has grown to $28,000. So, and I really like this example because it reminds us that building wealth isn't about hitting a home run and picking the best stock or having a large amount of money to invest, because those small amounts that you invest over time can really make a difference, right? Especially the younger you start with the child, the more time it has to compound. And so I think that's a really good example that, just a little bit here and there can make a big difference. And when you make the contributions, the app allows you to put in as little as $1 at a time. So that sounds really small, but everything adds up in the long term. So in another example here, this one, the child is too old to get the $1,000 contribution. So instead, grandparents give them $500 a year on their birthday. And so the grandparents contributing $500 a year from age 5 to age 18. So essentially they put in $6,500 into the account over that time frame, and it's worth about $13,000 by the time the kid is 18. So even if the child doesn't qualify for the $1,000 contributions, families can still begin investing and getting some of that compound growth working. So this can be a great place to sock birthday money that the kids receive, holiday gifts, or any small monthly contribution that you can fit into your budget. So it's really not about just being able to qualify for the government seat funding, but just giving your money time to grow and investing whatever little bits that you can. So how does this fit in with other accounts? So when I first heard about the Trump accounts, my initial thought was, well, if you don't qualify for the free $1,000, there's some other vehicles out there that are more tax advantaged, more flexible. So maybe it's just not the right fit. But as I've studied them more, I feel like there's a lot more nuances and planning opportunities here. And it may be good for families to have kind of a mix of these accounts to fund different goals. So a lot of questions that I'm getting from clients is, should I do this instead of a 529 plan? Or should I do this instead of saving for retirement? And the answer is probably no, right? But to compare, a 529 account is a different tax vehicle where, you put in money and it grows tax-free if used for education in the future. So it's mostly meant for college education funding, but it's pretty flexible in what it pays for in terms of, tuition, books and fees, and other kind of higher education related expenses. But the big benefit there is that tax-free growth. So that's something that the 530A accounts do not have. You can also use the 529 to pay for kindergarten through 12th grade private school tuition. So if there's the goal that is before the kid is 18, the 530A account might not be the only account you want to have. So, and when you think about, other things that you're saving for, you want to continue prioritizing your retirement and saving for that, because you can't get loans to pay for retirement in the future. And then you still want to make sure you have an emergency fund and all that to handle day-to-day things. But this account can be a great tool to add to your tool chest, when you're thinking about building wealth for your family and giving your family options for the future. So when I think about these accounts, if you're saving for college education, the 529 still might be the most tax advantage vehicle. But taking advantage of the 530A in terms of, getting the government seed funding, getting employer contributions, and maybe contributing some of the money kids get from family members over time, they can work together in a really great way where you have a bucket of money ready to pay for post-high school education expenses, and then also kind of a head start leg up on retirement savings or more longer term things like buying their first home and those sort of things. So, if you remember 3 things from today, I hope the first one, if your child qualifies, don't overlook the opportunity to receive that government $1,000 contribution. That is free money, and that in itself, can quadruple over time to give your kid a head start on education funding, buying a house, or medical expenses, or getting the retirement started, right? Because if you think about when you got your first job after high school or college, it was hard to start saving money because you didn't maybe make as much money as you had hoped, and you were building in your career. But by saving in these accounts, the kid already has a potential retirement balance built up by the time, they're 18, which can be really cool. Secondly, this is a long-term investment account. So it's important to understand the benefits and limitations of that before opening one. Because the power of it can be really great if you're using it as a long-term vehicle. But if you put too much money in there that you need sooner than the kid is 18, then that can cause you some problems in the long run. And then third, the biggest lesson here is the earlier you start investing, the more time you have to grow that money. So you can see kind of the 3 examples on this slide of, the seed funding and nothing else being contributed, the $1,000 seed funding plus $50 a month from the parents for 18 years, and then $100 a month for family contributions, and how much that can add up over time. So whether you're using a 538 account or a 529 account or any other investment account, time is one of the most valuable assets an investor has. And I think arming yourself with education on these topics can help you make the right decisions to see what fits best with your family. So I appreciate you all coming today. I know this is a brand new program and there's a lot of details that are still going to continue and evolve, but we want to have time for all your questions. And I know you've been submitting them since we've started. So I will turn it over to Amy and we can get that part started.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. That was great. And I really feel like that gives us a better understanding of how those accounts work and the roles that, they play in a family's long-term savings strategy. I want to just reiterate a couple of things that she says that we talk about a lot here, that are key takeaways that we talk about a lot here at America Saves. First, starting early can be so powerful. It gives that savings so much more time to grow, right? And then secondly, consistency matters more than the contribution size. Small deposits made regularly can really add up over time. And I'll remind everyone that one of our favorite things to say here at America Saves is start small, but think big, right? So those small, even if you can only do small contributions, they really do add up over time. And then third, these accounts may create an opportunity for parents, grandparents, employers, and others to contribute towards a child's future, which is also very powerful. And finally, I like to remind everybody that there's no one size fits all approach to savings. This is just one more tool that, that can align with your goals and your priorities and your family's needs. And so with that, like she said, we got plenty of time for questions. We've got several minutes. And we do have some questions in the chat. And so I'm going to pull them up, Jamie. And if you're ready, I'm just going to start and pick a few to ask. So the first one is, since grandparents can contribute, and you touched on this, but let's clarify. Since grandparents can contribute after tax dollars, will contributions be able to count, will contributors be able to count these deductions of at tax time, or can only parents claim the contributions?
Well, so there's no tax benefit for making the contribution today. So that's one thing that is kind of a con against 530As versus like 529 plans, where when you make a contribution, you might get a state tax benefit today for doing so. So both the parent contributions and the grandparent contributions are after tax, and you'll want to track that. But there's no tax benefit for the grandparents putting the money in.
Okay, this is a good one. Do contributions have to be made from a paycheck, or can a regular payment method or bank account be linked to make contributions?
Yep. So you can link a bank account, or you can actually use like a debit or credit card to link to the account to fund it.
Great. Perfect.
Yeah. And I think if you are going to do something like $50 a month, I think it's great to set it up on an automatic program. So it just happens every month on the 15th or whenever you want it to. That way you don't have to manually do it every time. It's just something that happens automatically.
Absolutely. And saving automatically, we like to reinforce, it's the easiest way to save. So set it and forget it and let it go. It's easy. All right. Next one. At what rate did you figure it will be almost 5,000, 5%? So they're asking what rate you based your examples of growth on.
Yes. So those were a 9% average return rate. So, and that's kind of what we see with the funds are invested in the S&P 500 index. And that's kind of what we see for that over the long term, right? On average, about 9%. So some years it's positive 20%, some years it's negative 10%, but on the long-term average, around a 9% return rate.
So there's two questions that kind of go together, and I'm gonna, I lost one. So the first one is, can the child keep the account open and contribute themselves after age 18?
Yes. So that's what's cool about the really long-term longevity of the potential of these accounts, is that when the kid turns 18, they don't have to cash it out and spend it, right? It just turns into a traditional IRA for them. So at that point, if they qualify to contribute to an IRA, meaning they have earned income, then they can do that. They can keep adding to it and keep growing it. So they have that head start up to age 18, and then now they can continue using it, as their retirement vehicle to keep adding to it. And another kind of nuance that is coming out, now is that since these accounts are pre-tax, you can actually convert them to Roth after the child is 18. And then, when you convert to a Roth, you make that whole thing taxable in that year, and then it becomes a Roth account. And so a lot of people don't like to do it because you're already, paying quite a bit of taxes. Maybe your income's higher and you don't want to add more to your tax bill. But when you're a 21-year-old person, you may not even have a job yet, or you might not have a high paying job. So creating that additional tax at that point in your life to turn those dollars into Roth can be a great planning tool, because then they'll grow tax free forever after that.
Well, that was perfect because you kind of answered the question that went with it. And that was about, if the child takes it out for not an expense that's qualified, will they be taxed at their tax rate? So that was great. All right, let's see. Can my child have a 529 and a Trump account? And you kind of talked about that. But go ahead.
Yes, they definitely can. And I think having both is going to be just a part of a normal family plan now, because I do think the 529 plans offer a little bit more flexibility and better tax advantages, because with those accounts, money you're putting in there comes out tax free. So all the growth is always tax free, where the 538 Trump account, that you're getting taxed on that growth in the future. And so I think having both can be a great thing. I have both for my kids, and I think I'll just kind of use them in different ways. More with the 529 being the kind of fund post high school education vehicle, and then maybe the Trump account being something that we use for future Roth conversions and kind of starting that retirement portfolio.
Perfect. Okay. Couple more. Does it stay as an investment account after the child turns 18? You answered that. Oh wait, you answered that one. That one rolled. I'm sorry. This next question is, the Q&A is rolling on me, like going crazy. So I'm sorry, bear with me. How do you recommend tracking those post-tax contributions over the years into the account to best handle future disbursements? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would track it either just like in a spreadsheet, or even in like a note on your phone that says, okay, I've been doing $50 a month each year. And so we'll capture that, like, this is how much I've put in over time. And then anytime you do a one-off, like say you get a tax refund and put a couple hundred in there, just kind of add that to your running spreadsheet or list. And then I would just keep it, like if you're keeping it digitally, maybe keep it in a tax folder or something that you keep your other tax stuff in, or keep it in a tax file if you keep paper files. Because I think that's one nuance that people won't be paying attention to, right? Is that you can track that tax basis in what you have put in, and then it's not taxed in the future. But I think a lot of people will forget that step, and it'll all just kind of get washed together and all taxed in the future.
Yeah, I think that is a great tip, because I had not thought about that until you said it today, like for my children, so yes, it's important to track it. All right, we got 1 or 2 more minutes left, and so we will take a couple questions more, but here is one. How much of the account can be for the purchase of a house at age 18? They're saying that some sources say 10,000, others say 25%.
Yes. I don't have a clear answer for that, actually, because I feel like I've seen different things too. So I'm not exactly sure what they've landed on in terms of what's the amount. And I think as it continues to roll out, since they've just been around for a few weeks, we'll keep seeing, changes, and it'll evolve over time.
All right, let's see. Okay, we'll end with this one. There's a lot of good questions in the chat, and we can't get this to them all. And I appreciate everyone's willingness to put their questions in. But for the sake of time, we'll take one more. What's the biggest misconception you've heard about these accounts?
Oh gosh, the biggest misconception, I would say, I don't know if this is a misconception or not, but I think people put it in a kind of a political box. And it's like, okay, well, it's called a Trump account and I don't like Trump, so I don't want to have one. Instead of looking at the big picture of like, how can this benefit my family and how can I use this as a tool to build wealth for my kids? So I think putting aside, our political views or preferences and just looking at the account for what it is and what it can be, for you and your family, no matter what the name is or, who started it.
Great way to end. So, Jamie, thank you all for joining us today. And thank you again, Jamie, for sharing, your expertise in helping break down this topic in a clear, practical way. We truly hope that today's conversation gave you a better understanding of what these accounts are and how they may fit into a broader savings strategy. So we appreciate all of you for being part of our America Saves community. And we look forward to seeing you on our next session. Everybody have a great day.